In the biography section, I was working with grade 6 students, and they had various speech bubbles with I can statements inside that I had them coloring in if they were able to do that I can. A strategy that I found worked really well is rather than just coloring it in or not coloring it in, I had students use a color coding system. So if they were able to do that outcome 100% without help, they were to color that in green. If they were able to do the outcome with some help, they colored it yellow. If they were able to do it with lots of help, they colored it in an orange. And if they weren't able to do it yet, and I did communicate this as you're not able to do it yet, as in you will be able to do this one day, they were to not color that in at all. I made sure to communicate with students that it's okay if you don't know something, if you haven't colored it in, because we haven't covered everything yet, and they will learn it. And no matter what color they have colored a bubble in, that's great because they know something. So always trying to keep it really positive for all students so that they could feel comfortable no matter what colors or lack of colors were on their page.
There are many easily accessible resources that you can use to implement the language portfolio into your classrooms. At the beginning, it takes a little bit of legwork to kind of figure out exactly how you're going to implement the biography or the passport. However, you can go online and you can easily find template people have already used. The template that I use for the language portfolio is actually a combination of a few different templates that I took from Canada and from France, because some of the activities in some templates take too long or they're just not good for your students, and so I kind of was able to pick and choose. So luckily for us, there's a lot of things out there, so you do not have to recreate the wheel, which will save you a lot of time and a lot of effort.
I found it really helpful to tailor the checklist to the specific tasks. So rather than give them one huge checklist for every potential can-do statement at an A1 level, for example, I might pare it down to just the 4 or 5 things that we were working on at that particular moment and give them the opportunity to reflect on the extent to which they felt they could do that checklist. And then as the year goes on, I just sort of build new checklists that allow them to compare over time what they're able to do at any given point, rather than overwhelming them with one gigantic checklist of every single can-do statement.
One of the big challenges that I've found with implementing the ELP and even talking with students about the CFR is having enough time to fit it into my daily classes or classes where I only see the students maybe twice a week, and then you have other things that enter into it like assemblies and field trips and interfere with the time that you have. So it can be very difficult. One of the things that I found has worked, or a solution that I found for that, is to make the ELP part of our stations so that when we have a day when the students are rotating to different stations in the class, one of the things that they do is to work on their language portfolio. They do theirs as a digital portfolio, so it allows them to sit in a group and still have the opportunity to share with one another as they start to work on whatever aspect of it we've decided is the most important for that particular week or that particular time. Sometimes it might be adding in some work into their actual dossier. Sometimes it might be where they're adding to their list of apps and resources, something that they find really useful, because then they're putting tools that they think will really benefit them, and they can use those on their projects and use them on things that they're working on during the class time. They also might take the opportunity, if they've had another language experience or they've had something that they've worked on that goes under the category of being a cultural experience, or maybe even just thought about something in their own history that they'd like to add to their biography. After talking to other students in their group, they might decide that that's what they would like to work on that specific day. So I think that's worked rather well. It means it's a short period of time that they're asked to focus on it, maybe about 10 to 15 minutes during the class time. They get the opportunity to work on some other things during the class, so it doesn't become something that's arduous for them.
There's many different ways to implement the language portfolio into your classroom, so you really need to know your students and the dynamics of your classroom before starting. My students at the high school level are quite academic, especially when they get into French 20 or French 30, the later years of French. And so they need to see the portfolio as something that is official. So I even chose templates that looked official to give a little bit of legitimacy to the project and to garner their attention. It's also important to realize that these kids need to see the portfolio as something that's pragmatic, that it is useful for career and study purposes. And also you need to kind of pepper that idea with intrinsic motivations, that it's important for them to realize how far that they've come in the language in the hope that it will inspire them to continue. For me, the mistake that I made was trying to do the language portfolio too quickly. It's really a project that should take time and that should be done over a semester. So giving the language portfolio at the beginning of the year to do an initial assessment, collecting evidence in their dossier throughout the semester, and then giving them time to reassess their language proficiency at the end of the semester is the best way, in my opinion, of doing this at the high school level.
When I was doing the language passports with my students, I noticed that they tended to overestimate their level in English, so thinking that they had a very high level in English when in fact a lot of them had a bit of a lower level, and they tended to underestimate their level in the second language in French, so that I can't speak the language sort of attitude. To mitigate this, I brought in examples of texts in English at different levels, and we looked at them with the students very closely so they could then compare what they knew with the text and more accurately tell what level on the CEFR they were with English. And then we went through some of the tasks we had done in French class and picked out the I can statement, so what can you do, and looked at the CEFR and just highlighted on the CEFR some of the can do statements that the students could do, so they could look at the grid and actually see what their level was in French, and this helped a lot with the students being more accurate.